Hello everyone. It has been wonderful and inspiring to hear and see all the presentations and provocations made over the last 2 days across all the panels. My paper for this conference is titled In Betweenness of the Soil and the Sky, Urban Spatial Imaginaries of the Post-Human Landscape. And as the title suggests, I try to look at more than human narratives that emerge from the backyard, or one would even say the front yard of the city, where I happen to live, in Mumbai. The paper is divided into 3 main sections, and I intend to open out one of the sections called Invasive Mutualism in Post-Dairy Landscapes and briefly touch upon the other 2. As the golden blades of paragrass, a warm seasonal grass, sway in the breeze, Mohan from Orissa silently works in the field located close to the 70-year-old cowshed housing more than 100 crossbreed buffaloes. A number of settlements like the one in which Mohan resides, as well as the old indigenous padas within the RML colony, are notified as slums by the municipal authorities. This poses a constant threat to the rights, livelihood, and tenure security of these groups after the notification of the RML colony into a reserved forest. The Milk Colony has always been contested land, which has historically seen forced relocations and resettlements of its indigenous inhabitants to accommodate other needs of the city, like different kinds of institutions, such as the famous film city in the late 1970s. To date, indigenous communities of Nawapada and Tumblipada in Sanjay Gandhi National Park, adjacent to Ari, face threats of eviction and relocation into 2-storied houses for each family inside a 45-acre patch of land in Ari itself. The 2014-2015 development plan has slated this patch of land for the resettlement of a majority of the Wali community in the city of Mumbai. The crux of these contestations essentially lie in the following question that the neoliberal state poses with every new infrastructure project planned in this green patch within Mumbai. Is RA a forest or merely just a grassland? This question arises to then allow development for the urban majority. Although the idea of a centralized government-operated dairy had its roots in 1938, the Maharashtra government carved out 1,300 hectares of forest land from Borivali National Park only in 1949. Geographically, the then Borivali National Park straddled the boundaries of Mumbai as well as Thane districts, which was always inhabited by the indigenous Wali communities who had traditional rights to the land and practiced farming and animal husbandry and foraging. With the redrawing of the cartographic map, these lands could included in the demarcated boundary of RML colony itself. Thus, revenue village boundaries, forest department boundaries, and new city district and taluka boundaries all overlapped and created a complex mesh of cartographic lines over the newly allocated dairy land that needed state simplification. This was solved with introducing and building on the architecture of fences to hold the movement of both the humans and more than human beings within 40 proposed dairy farms. These fences were imagined to hold within them what would be large grasslands and pastures to provide the necessary fodder for the dairy cattle also. By the time the 1946 development plan was put into motion, the government granted leases to various collectives and individual entities to transform unproductive forest land through their labor to fit into the vision of the Bombay Milk Scheme. However, for the scheme to succeed and to centralize dairy operations, small cattle shed owners whose tabelas were largely located across the riverine belts and within the main island city had to be relocated to the designated milk colony precinct. To make this resettlement more attractive, stables and living quarters with toilets were promised by the Dairy Development Board, along with ancillary facilities like schools and hospitals, both for humans and the modern human beings. For feeding the cattle, the dairy board then introduced paragrass, which was promised to be a better, high-yield, nutritional and fast-growing plant that would improve milk supply and be beneficial for the animals. The original inhabitants of the padas whose dependencies were intricately tied to the forests in RA were encouraged to participate in animal husbandry and the dairy processes. The introduction of paragraphs changed the landscape and signaled the making of a new socio-ecological order, during which governance worked through grass and cattle. Cattle whose occupation of space had slowly started displacing indigenous people during the setting up of the milk colony. Pastures, often unoccupied by cattle, did the work of taking over space and transferring its control to the dairy owners or the dairy board to be leased or developed in the future, as seen in the case of the metro shed. The paragraphs, pastures and RA also became a gateway to land ownership and property titles, and gave pasture owners access to incentives and subsidies that would be used as capital. They also aligned the dairy farm with the state's project of urban development. Despite state efforts to order and control the landscape, these endeavors failed, and modern human logic got out of hand despite carrying out the zoning of human, plants and animals alike. The paragraphs evaded the spatial restrictions that limited cattle movement, sidestepped cartographic lines that facilitated land claims, and remade the landscape in ways which defied the intricate maps of planned development, and broke through formal property demarcations and fences. The language of planning and cartographic drawing has been employed in RA Mill Colony to facilitate reduction in the actual area of the colony as well as change the land designation historically. This is used to facilitate the changing vision of the state and accommodate infrastructures for the urban majority. Thus, as the area under RA Colony reduced to accommodate allied uses for the city at large, so did the paragraphs, pastures and indigenous farms, and the spatio-geographical relationships of the indigenous communities with the adjacent Sanjay Gandhi National Park itself. For example, in the year 1981, the development plan said that RA Mill Colony was designated as a no development zone. But this new demarcation was 23% smaller than the original area reserved for RA Mill Colony in 1964. Very recently, in the year 2020, 812 hectares of land inside RA was demarcated as a reserved forest. This land includes indigenous homes, farms, and wadis. This has also led to the state systematically destroying the crops just as they reach harvest readiness, pressuring communities to vacate their forest homes in the guise of protecting the city's greens. On the other hand, the Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation argues that the area is not a forest but merely grasslands to justify the building of infrastructural projects like the Metro car shed. Here, the presence of the invasive grass becomes a tool to argue for meeting the infrastructural needs of the city. To date, white cattle egrets, along with manias and drongos, make their way to the artificial irrigation stream that snakes through the paragrass pastures in search of prey. The paragrass species has now integrated itself and created a unique grassland and scrub ecosystem within the mill colony. The waterways and drains that sustain these grassy pastures are the native habitats of fish species, crabs, shrimps, and checkered keelback water snakes. The forest now accommodates the cultivation of this grass and other crop as a crucial component of sustenance for domesticated animals and its migrant, resettled, and indigenous communities alike. A hillock away, in the prime indigenous goddess Gaudevi's garden, outside the caretaker's brick home, ran bhaji such as bhagar, chakwat, kurdai, shepu, chakoti, and methi, and most importantly bamboo, harken the monsoon into the padas. Two agricultural spirit gods, Kansari and Vadlia, inhabit the space of the farms and pastures alike in the forest, along with Vaghya, whose namesake the leopard roams in the fields, pastures and gardens and the dense clumps of vegetations alike, unaware of the property demarcations. These spirits hold a distinct place in the cosmology of the communities that reside here. Their existence exemplifies the fluidity of boundaries between the physical and the metaphysical world, and they are invoked in times of celebration as well as duress, such as now. Thus, on specific days of the month, the communities and spirits alike come together to celebrate the Ranbhaji Mahotsav, where food out of the forest is prepared and shared with the padas and guests from beyond RA Mill Colony. By preserving these customs and continuing to celebrate their festivals, the communities resist and ensure the preservation of their status and the rights that help protect their land and livelihood in the context of regulations such as the Forest Rights Act. The paragraphs and the migrant bodies themselves intermingle and form unique adjacencies with the paddy and vegetable farms, and create unique ecosystems where new species of more than human beings are found who migrate here in search of sustenance. A recent study on the biodiversity of the milk colony further elucidates this unique invasion and the kinships it has fostered, where now a juxtaposition of densely forested habitats, natural and man-made grasslands, riverine vegetation, plantations, cattle sheds, and little built-up complexes, with their contiguity with the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, provide the milk colony with unique and diverse ecosystems and ecotones, even unavailable in the protected forests. Are colony a consequence of human cultivation inadvertently provides new habitats and niches for these more than human actors and spirits alike to form collectives, expanding the ecological diversity of the area and at the same time becoming a space of active resistance in the openly contested forest land of Arya. From this vignette, I conclude that major and minor issues tend to look identical on global maps. A more accurate and inclusive mapping practice demands diverse spatial scales, perspectives, and modes of representation. The case of RML colony, through the proliferation of paragraphs, serves as a reminder that the boundaries we draw on maps can never fully encapsulate the complex interconnected networks both human and more than human beings inhabit and continue to shape space. Within this becoming of space, multiple co-temporalities exist. This implies that numerous biosocial processes occur concurrently beyond logics of property and cartography, each operating at its own distinct pace, forming infrastructures of mutuality. The invasive mutualism showcased by paragraphs has, in turn, provided strong allyship towards indigenous claims of protecting fast diminishing vestiges of forest in the city by producing unique ecotones. Engaging with these narratives demands challenging contemporary wisdom and thus modes of seeing, drawing, and representation for the spatial practitioner. The next vignette of more than human inhabitation I intend to briefly touch upon is called Productive Infestations on Flyover Bridges. In the suburban neighborhoods of Mumbai along riverbanks, indigenous, informal, and planned rooftops transform into a sea of tarps. Ambavadi, an informal neighborhood along the riverbank, faces scrutiny due to its vulnerability to annual floods. The presence of a flyover on the riverbank exacerbates these conditions. In the year 1980s, the land earmarked for the flyover would have necessitated the eviction of households and land acquisition from the then landowner Ghanshyam Das Dubey. The political landscape in Mumbai was changing around that time, with the Shiv Sena coalition coming into power on the promise of a new slum rehabilitation scheme to address informal settlements issues and improve living conditions. These neighborhoods were crucial vote banks, which strengthened these residents' claims and bargaining powers with the ruling body. Strong social networks and community cohesion in Ambavadi played a crucial role in providing support and addressing common challenges, and were successfully in bargaining with the local level politician to shift the flyover alignment through inventive citizen action. During the monsoon, these neighborhoods accommodate not only the changing political will of the state, such as the previous example, but also various creatures akin to the nearby Sanjay Gandhi National Park. Homemaking practices, again, are widely influenced by the nature of the river, where plastic and stone furniture, easily foldable and movable, and mechanisms to store valuable within roofs all emerge as a response to the fear of evictions and the catastrophes brought in by the arrival of monsoon along the riverbanks on which habitation is built. Thus, when monsoon's musty air causes doors and windows to swell, the termite colonies establish their intricate networks within the soil, which under the thin layer of concrete is ever damp and clay-like, atop which these informal neighborhoods as well as planned plotted schemes are built. They exploit the tiniest crevices in the home's foundation to infiltrate the structure. Such is the infestation that informal housing projects, redevelopment agreement clauses include termite treatment and eradication in the foundation or basement as a necessary clause for which the real estate developer is liable for up to 5 to 10 years. These beings, despite these technical and legal mechanisms put together by humans to safeguard their homes, continue to feast on the celluloid-rich components of the house, predominantly furniture and structural elements, as well as paper and cardboard. By the time these telltale signs become apparent, the infestation has often reached an advanced stage, necessitating collective measures such as pest control in the formal neighborhoods or remaking of the home itself in the informal communities to halt the relentless devouring of the house. As residents adapt to these unexpected cohabitants like termites and the state alike, the line between tolerance and exasperation blurs. The home itself emerges as an inventive form of infrastructure that is co-created by human and more than human beings alike, enabled by the aqueous nature of the river. These homes become porous thresholds where human floors, labor, capital, and more than human infestations are accommodated. These infestations bring into focus that boundaries of home and as infrastructures are not intended to be static. While maps of atmospheric pressures, humidity charts, wind pressures, and infrastructural networks of drainage water supply might be useful in predicting future calamities, the inhabited geographies of termite invasion hint and shape productive practices of homemaking and infrastructures of care that come to address the everyday narratives of a changing climate. The tides controlled by celestial bodies dictate and reshape the rhythm of human and more than human life on the sandy intertidal beaches of Juhu Koliwada. As the sea advances during high tide, it leaves behind temporary pools and tidal flats, creating niches for small marine organisms, octopuses, brittle stars, mollusks, sponges, anemones, crabs, snails, and algae to thrive. New literal vegetation has begun surfacing after years since the first footprints of mass city infrastructural intervention, like the ceiling connector, casting yards, and pumping stations, were sutured into the breach. The monsoon in recent years specifically brings large colonies of brilliant blue beings to the liminal realm where the sea and land embrace. These beings untouched inconspicuously sting humans and more than humans alike. The first to arrive in these colonies as visitors is the blue button jellyfish, or the Porpita porpita, which belongs to a group of hydrozoans. The second to arrive sequentially is the by-the-wind sailor, resembling a small translucent sailboat or a delicate deep blue sea creature harnessing the power of the wind to traverse the sea. Last but not the least, and the deadliest, the Portuguese man-of-war makes its appearance. The sightings of these beings are on the rise in the fishing grounds of this coast, as shared by a field interlocutor and resident of the Juhu Koliwada. This is a phenomenon only noticed post the 2000s, where the community links their presence with the coming up of massive infrastructure projects on the coast and within the sea, encroaching on their fishing grounds, such as the ceiling connector, casting yards, and pumping stations. The Juhu Koliwada coast to date is also one of the most densely populated, privatized, and contested spaces in the city, where high land values and speculation dictate unhindered development. The various stages of these organisms' life cycles interact differently with the large man-made infrastructure like the ceiling connector. For instance, the polyp stage, which is often critical in their life cycle, finds suitable substrates on the artificial structures created by humans in the sea. Field interviews and studies conducted, especially in the context of the Adriatic Sea, have concluded that the increased frequency and intensity of these sightings and jellyfish bloom are a result of human interventions in natural habitats where man-made infrastructures provide appropriate settlement substrates, allowing these beings to literally cement their presence, as in the intertidal zone of Juhu Koliwada. Marine Life of Mumbai, a group of environmental enthusiasts, conduct intertidal walks along the shores of Mumbai, where citizens who participate are acquainted with these blue beings. The indigenous community of the Kolis themselves participate in some of these excursions as experts. While the jellyfish bloom attracts participants, the walk themselves open up and showcase multiple beings that make home in the intertidal and the subsequent politics and impacts of building mass infrastructure along Mumbai's shores. An easily neglected spatial characteristic of mass infrastructure, such as the sea-link connector, turns out to be a key affordance for modern human agency to proliferate and claim the sea as well as the intertidal. While invasion in this case is counterproductive, speculative fiction hints at the possibility of these modern human beings making redundant projects of modernity in the far future. Engaging with these scales expand and challenge the ideas of what constitute the spatial boundaries of dependencies, and thus the logic through which climate action and mitigation ought to be imagined. Therefore, I'll conclude that through engaging with these practices of making kin, relationships, and forging new dependencies, how can methods of drawing and representation help spatial practitioners to think through the infrastructural lines of the map as beyond isolated instances of pro-environment politics, but as inventive spaces of everyday citizen action that insert and integrate the human, but as well as the modern human residents into the wider urban fabric in a city surrounded and constantly shaped by rising tides. Moreover, to invoke Simon and Benjamin to question the language of planning itself as a whole, where in such contexts, as demonstrated, how does one begin borrowing from these modern human vocabularies when the question of climate mitigation emerges? The work thus argues for engaging with the notion that human and modern human tensions are intricately linked to the question of environment and spatial justice, and to comprehend the urban environment in the face of a changing climate thus requires an understanding of this modern human agency.